Good evening, everyone. We will be starting in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for giving everyone an opportunity to join in. So a couple more minutes and we'll get started. All right, good evening again, everyone. I am Keith Harris. I'm the Area Superintendent for Region 4. I would like to thank you for choosing to attend the Region 4 Facilities Master Plan Community Conversation meeting tonight. Before we begin tonight's conversation, we felt it was important to acknowledge the tragic deaths of two of our Columbus City School students who were killed yesterday. The last 24 hours in our city have been a whirlwind. They've been challenging, and quite frankly, they've been painful. We want to acknowledge and validate those experiences. We are aware of the weight that many of you are carrying in tonight's meeting, and we want you to know that we too are carrying that weight. Before we get started, I ask that we all take a moment of silence to honor our students, Makaya Bryant and Trayvon Dixon. Thank you. With that, I will turn it over to our co-chairs.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Stephen Hardwick, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm the volunteer co-chair for Region 4 of Columbus City Schools, and my job tonight is to help facilitate this conversation and take you through the agenda of the evening. We ask that you please keep your camera on for the entirety of the meeting, but keep your microphones on mute until we get into the breakout room discussions. Use the chat function if you have any questions, and we will have other regional volunteers assist in making sure you're heard. We'll also acknowledge when we don't have an answer that you may be asking in the chat. I would ask that that everyone here please help us exercise just a little bit of grace. Everyone will have an opportunity to voice their opinion. Help us to remain positive, because we know that this year has been stressful, and sometimes conversations about facilities and planning of the future can also be stressful. But we're going to remain positive and constructive. We will acknowledge when we don't have answers right now, and all of the questions in the chat will be documented by our student lead, Safi Miyoki, and answered by district staff at a later time and compiled into an FAQ document. Tonight we have representation from Leggett Architects, who is the planning consultant to assist in the process. Leggett will now introduce two videos that we have for you tonight.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Again, my name is Dennis Pabin. I am an architect with Leggett Architects, and I'm very proud to be here on behalf of the entire Leggett team to help facilitate the process from beginning to end. And so we have, this is the very start of a very exciting road ahead. So with that, Misty, I will stop sharing and
I'm as a educator of over 30 years. It concerns me when I see that, or at least what I believe is, we have communities that have become disengaged from their schools, and I just believe that our schools are a key element of any community and a key kind of bedrock of communities. And so I believe that we've got to better engage and more meaningfully engage our communities back into how we're thinking about our students and how we're thinking about the design of our schools. I've had experiences where I engage the communities in thinking about, what is it we want, in knowing that this is a rapidly changing world, interconnected, global, rapidly changing world. What do we want for our children? And these schools are the community schools. They're not Karen schools. And so how do we invigorate and excite people around what's going on in that school down the street? And how do we engage them in new and different ways? And I think if we can reinvigorate, reconnect our communities back to our schools, it will make our schools better and ultimately create better conditions and better outcomes for our kids.
Good. Okay. We also have board member Tina Pierce here, and Dr. Tina Pierce and Dr. Keith Harris, who is the area superintendent. And I'm pleased to introduce board member Dr. Tina Pierce.
Thank you so much. And I first want to echo that our community is hurting right now, given the tragic loss and murders that occurred on yesterday with two of our students. So I too want to thank you all for taking the time to join this much needed conversation. Our facility master plan really lays a foundation for the facilities in which our students will walk into to learn, the facilities in which our community stakeholders and our partners will walk into to be able to share their resources, information, and knowledge with our students. So my heart is warmed to see familiar faces and names of individuals that have engaged with a variety of not just our schools, but also our students on a regular basis. So again, thank you all so much for attending tonight. Our charge throughout this conversation, this discussion, is to not only be innovative and creative and respond to the needs that our students have today, but to the needs that our students will have in the future. And that video captured it quite well. When we looked at the robotics, I had to smile, and I love whoever circled that little one horse and buggy that was left in the New York parade in 1913, I think was the year. We see that distinction, that change occurring here in our city, in which right now today, we can name school districts and schools that have that advanced robotics. And we can name those schools and school districts that are still operating with that one horse and buggy. And while we must also acknowledge the fact that statewide funding plays an issue into the conversation that we'll have today, it's critically important that we, using the resources that are at our disposal, the resources that we can control as a community and as a district, in earnest come together to create spaces in which our students can learn and be prepared for a successful lifetime of leadership, economic success, and just overall life fulfillment, however they define that. And so as we have the conversation today, I would also like to charge us to think about not only how do we create those spaces in Region 4, but also how do we create a model within Region 4 that can then be used within all of our regions. We want to make sure that within our district, equity is always the foundation and key, so that all of our schools have the robotics and the resources that prepare our students for the future, and that none of our schools are still left in operating with that one horse and buggy. And being a member of Region 4's community, having students that have attended Region 4 schools and are still active and engaged in Region 4 schools as a student, I know that our region has the passion and has the individuals that are capable of transforming not only the buildings in our region, but the buildings throughout our district. So again, thank you so much for engaging in our much needed dialogue and conversation tonight. I'm pleased to also introduce our area superintendent, Dr. Harris, who is here. And I will now provide him with an opportunity to carry us to the next phase. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce. I think Dr. Pierce pretty much said it very well. But I want to thank you for taking the time tonight, whether you be a parent, a student, a CCS employee, or one of my principals or other administrators, or other staff that works in the region. We thank you for participating in this process tonight. I think most of you probably know Region 4 is primarily in the northwest area of the city. We're composed of 19 schools and one program, which is the ESL English Secondary Language, our newcomer program for those students coming in and learning English. This is also the region with our language immersion feeder pattern, which is Ecole Kenwood Columbus Spanish Immersion Academy, the new World Language Middle School, which will open up its doors during the 21-22 school year. And they all feed into Columbus North International School. So again, the purpose tonight is to hear your voices, your ideas, and the innovation that I know you're going to bring to this conversation. Our students deserve the best facilities possible. So again, thank you for your input. Those of you who are not in CCS, I think I neglected to mention you, but in whatever capacity you are as an external stakeholder with our district, we appreciate your input. So again, thank you for engaging in this conversation tonight.
Pardon me. Thank you, Dr. Pierce and Dr. Harris. Just to let you know, I am very proud to be part of a team that will be helping facilitate the master plan with you. So we are participating in these regional discussions for all 6 Columbus City Schools regions. And we have a team that's put together to encompass all different facets of planning. And so when we move from the topic of conversation like today of where are we to what are we going to do? So that's where we have our full process. We have a customizable collaborative process that we are starting today. What we call the gather phase is where we are just trying to immerse ourselves in the culture and understanding where we are and where are our challenges and where are our successes. In the 5 phases, the first, what we call problem defining. And over the next 2 months, we will start breaking these down, and the envision phase is talking about our hopes and dreams. Where do we want to go? The define phase is more of the programmatic aspects of taking what are our challenges and what are our successes and what are our wishes, and then encompassing them into a square footage, if you will, or a space or something definable that we can put as an understandable puzzle piece. Starting in the fall, we will start solving the problem. Our consider phase is where we help you facilitate the conceptual ideas of what the plan should be. We'll have all of the data, we'll have our hopes and dreams, we'll have a programmatic puzzle piece, and then we'll start putting these pieces together. As they start taking shape, the final step is called transform. And that's where we help put all of the information together and shift it so we customize it to be your plan. That's the whole point of this collaborative process, is that we really understand what you want this plan to be and that you embrace it as your plan. Step one, here we are at the gather phase. The highlighted portions are where we are right now. We are getting a lot of data and history and understanding of where Columbus City Schools has been. But now we have an opportunity to talk to you, the stakeholders of these community schools, and understanding how they fit in with the community in the right way and what ways can be improved. We are having to involve ourselves with the activities of the school, but with the certain times that we're in, we are being a little more hesitant and cautious to not really jump into the schools right now, to understand and give the teachers and staff some space. So we understand that it's been challenging. So we are going to hold off a lot of our on-site analysis until later this summer. There is a history of master planning, and that history has brought in a lot of new opportunity, a lot of programs, a lot of new facilities. And this planning that has happened back in 2002 has led into some more specific planning, such as what happened in 2016, but that was designated for a specific number of schools and a specific scope of work. This process is to start from the ground up. This is a holistic community district plan. So we truly appreciate your time coming here, because we want everybody to understand the breadth and depth of what this plan is going to entail. How we are going to take these community conversations tonight, we do have a master plan committee in which all of the co-chairs and family ambassadors and student ambassadors will meet together. And we do have an opportunity to report back to some of the board and discuss of how we can consolidate the questions and concerns and use this information together. But in order to keep the conversation more intimate and more engaging, we wanted to break it down in this regional fashion. We've asked you and our co-chairs to reach out to everyone. When we talk about a community conversation, we are asking everyone to participate. At this point, there is no invaluable opinion. Everyone will be heard. We want everyone to be heard. And that's the point. This is truly the idea to be community outreach. And then as we gather that outreach, we focus down to how we assemble all of this information and how we get the decisions made. And then that brings how together we present this plan to the community. There are the volunteers that had a chance to introduce themselves, and myself, we are the consultant rep. So Stephen had a chance to talk about earlier what the plan is for tonight, and we'll go into some of the details. But I will be here for the course of the meeting. So if there's any chat or any questions you may have for me, please feel free. I'll be happy to answer where I can. So we do have the upcoming meetings scheduled so far. And so we hope that we will be rotating the different days and times. Just so you're aware, we will be leaving it up to the district communication staff and the co-chairs to help, similar to what happened tonight as far as getting the word out of when these meetings are. So we appreciate you being here, and we really look forward to your participation in the future. Okay, with that, we're going to get started with getting organized in our conversations. We have our this was basically the first step of our gatherers. We understand the regions, we understand the facilities, we understand the locations. Now it's time to understand the community members. With that, I'll hand it back to the co-chairs.
Thank you. This phase of the process leaves nothing from the discussion. when thinking about the future of Columbus City Schools, try to not only think about standardized curriculum teaching and learning, but other aspects of a school and how they relate to equity, diversity, and social emotional well-being within our community. Simply put, we want to know what's working and what's not working. And with that, our Zoom moderator will organize us into breakout rooms for more intimate conversation. When you received when you got this Zoom link, you were given a specific breakout room assignment. Please select that room when the options pop up. Each group will have a champion, reporter, and a scribe. After 30 minutes, we'll come back together and report to the group at large. Okay. When 10 minutes are remaining to start to go through each of the breakout rooms, we'll check in to check to make sure things are going okay. And we'll pop in from time to time. So go ahead and join the breakout rooms. So, welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to go through the groups, and everyone will get every group, we'd like to hear 1 to 2 minute summary of the important points that you have. If you try to keep it to that time limit, because we have, I believe, 15 groups, and we're going to try to respect everyone's time by completing the meeting when it's scheduled to be completed. Let's start with group 2. Someone from group 2 like to speak?
Hi, I'm from group 2. I'm sorry, we just came over. Are we just going through and providing some of the feedback?
1 to 2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So some of the things we thought were successful. Some schools have a good deal of parent involvement, lots of communication, involvement in parent-teacher organization. We mentioned that there's good collaboration and teamwork between the teachers, and that we see some improvements in some of the skills that the students have, particularly in reading. And we felt like the use of technology was improving. Some things that we felt like were barriers, and then maybe transitioning to ideas. I'm a physical therapist, and we had talked a little bit about the need for flexible seating to allow students of all abilities share and learn in the same physical space. So standing desks or desks with drawer space that can come to the students. Continue to improve the use of technology. We thought for the future, it'd be great if they had more outside opportunities, outdoor learning opportunities where they could host classes outside, but also engagement with the environment and with nature, recycling opportunities. We thought training healthy meals with the food services staff or other people that could come in and work with the students would be fun. We mentioned reliable HVAC systems. And lastly, just more involvement with the after-school programs. Maybe we could engage the students and parents and community members a bit more as a potential opportunity for more community involvement.
My space bar is not working as the unmute button like it's supposed to. I apologize. Group 4 now.
I think that is us. Some of the positives that we talked about were having good flexible learning spaces for students and teachers in different spaces of the building, and having updated technology, both for, we were thinking in particular thinking about the possibility of Colerain not having maybe what they need for their students with special needs, and just having throughout the space, throughout different spaces, just having the technology that works for the building. Some of the things that we discussed as potential problems or things to look at, HVAC was another concern that came up in our group. Buildings, older buildings that have maybe shared spaces for, the auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria, things like that, that create scheduling issues and, other problems. Buildings that don't have parking for families to attend events, and buildings where there's not proper technology were some of the things that came up in our group. My other members might be able to say more.
Thank you.
I think she
Group,
covered it all.
go ahead.
No, I think she covered it all.
Thank you. Group 5 now. Anyone from group 5 like to
Yes.
speak? Okay.
So we talked about the aspect of some of the schools are in local communities, and that's a very central thing that is a benefit to the school, with being able to involve the local community, involves a sense of where the student is part of that. And that's not true everywhere. So it's kind of fit both categories of it's a success where it's available. It's a bit of a barrier where it's not. And how do we bring in community when locality is not as easily available? Talked about these spaces. That's been a challenge at different schools that my daughter's experienced. And a certain number of seats per a certain number of square feet is a model that just won't work for some classes. Certain modes of delivery, a student or a teacher who has a specific project will at times need a different space. And so having flexibility to have more space for certain types of instruction would be a very positive aspect for a school. Having more flexible spaces in general would accommodate that. We also wondered how we could establish that sense of continuity along a student career, so that a student is tied to a community when they are going to be moving through several schools from kindergarten through graduation. How could they feel the sense that they're part of a community all the way through that time? And I'll leave it open if anybody else in my group wants to cover anything I've missed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. At the end, we're going to have the family ambassadors go through. Chris is going to go through and look for things that may have been missed and in overall from all the reports. Group 7.
Good evening. I'll go over a few of the things, some of which will be at 2 different locations because you had a small group with 2 principals in them. So in a high school, spacious classrooms, adequate lighting with windows, large green spaces in both spots to accommodate various athletic teams or student activities. Large common spaces of the cafeteria, at the high school, library, auditorium, gym. Science labs were updated, wide hallways to accommodate students, student parking, and AC to be updated in the upcoming summer. So if we look at that at an elementary school, vestibule upcoming, updated AC, wheelchair accessibility, and restrooms for students and guests, excellent green space. Some of our barriers, small group meeting spaces in both spots. Student services, limited areas for some of our student services, our counselors, social workers to work with students at a given time. And cafeteria, gym, auditorium in the same space, and limited number of student restrooms and staff restrooms.
Thank you. I just want to hear, you were group 7, correct? Or are you
Yes.
group 8? 7, okay. I need to mark people off as we go through. Group 8, please. Anyone from group 8 want to speak?
I don't remember what group I was in, but we might be group 8 or group 9. But we'll talk. I'll talk about it. So things that we were happy about were how buildings have been updated. We really liked their historic buildings that, you know, they kind of have that sense of community. And then we like the proximity of, like the other group was talking about, like having the community nearby the school. I think that is done pretty well. Smaller buildings, kind of another thing, fostering that community. Continuing with economic and ethnic diversity, I think that's important. And having strong communities surrounding the buildings. Going on to barriers, like other people have mentioned, you know, the fact there's not like universal air conditioning and not updated HVAC. I think that's everybody's worried about. And another thing was overly open classrooms where there's like multiple classrooms and kind of like a shared space. And there's a concern about noise, like between the classrooms, and also safety where you're just in this big open space. And then also finally, like on ideas, it was a discussion about like it was described as a land lab, which I guess New Albany has. And that's like being able to go like out into nature. I guess you can like collect salamanders or whatever things live in the wild in Columbus, and using outside as part of the classroom for science education.
Thank you. Is there group 9 report?
I'll speak for group 9. So our strengths are our teachers, our families, our community involvement. One of our group members said, you know, the human connection, our extracurriculars, our course offerings, like at the high school, CCP, AP, middle and high school. Our barriers, we feel that, of course, the heating and cooling in some of our buildings, but also schools being over capacity. And in one building, it's a building that hasn't been renovated. And then another building, it's a newly renovated building that's already over capacity. And then, of course, another barrier would be large class sizes.
Thank you. Group 10, please.
Stan, did you want to talk or do you want me to talk? All right, I'll take that as me. So we talked about the students definitely adapting to the constant change this year, teachers rising to the challenge, learning the different platforms rather quickly, the remote and hybrid pedagogy changing, the upgrades, the Project Fix It still continuing on with our older and historic buildings. Some of the things that we talked about as concerns were building sizes. For example, we have some schools that have 50 to 70% of their kindergartners entering without speaking English, but there's no space in the building to have a pre-K unit added, which would definitely help with that transition going into kindergarten and help serve a population that isn't getting served now. So definitely space in the buildings. We have far too many buildings that have their art, music, and choir in the same classroom. And in many, many cases, we have instrumental music happening in hallways. And that, you know, we shouldn't have to make do. Our students deserve better than just making do. Our students deserve classrooms. Our teachers deserve classrooms. We have elementary specialists with over 500 students in multiple school buildings. And parking in older buildings is non-existent. So I think, you know, it goes to that spacing issue with us, especially in our older buildings, just getting them renovated or rebuilt to better support those 21st century learning needs that our video showed at the beginning.
Thank you. Group 11.
I think that's me. We talked about some of the good qualities were the MD and special education programs that were available, and the amazing teachers that are part of that program. Some of the student opportunity programs with band and theater and choir and robotics, but the space is lacking for those programs, and having the ability to be able to really build the program across the feeder pattern is difficult. Support services, we have support services with counseling and working with, I know some schools are working with Nationwide Children's Hospital and to provide those services. Teacher retention is high. And collaboration among teachers is also high. Good community, parent involvement, good AP programs. Some of the things that we talked about that were some barriers, that there were not ESL services available at all schools, and families are signing waivers because they want to be at that school, and so they're willing to sign the waiver saying, I refuse services, even though they need to be able to have those services for them. And so we would like to see ESL services across every building. There are needs to be a continuation of services all the way through the feeder pattern. So if the elementary is offering certain special education or ESL services, the middle schools that they feed into should also have those same services available, so that we can make sure that those services are across the board and that they don't have to switch to a different feeder pattern. Space is lacking all over the place. Rooms are, I know in my building it's oddly shaped. The number of kids that can fit, closets have been turned into classrooms. Office space that used to be for storage are now classrooms. So you're running out of space as far as having places to put people. And that means that our support service staff doesn't have a place to meet with students because there isn't enough even space to have office space for those people to be able to provide the programs they need to be able to provide to our students. I would like to see vertical alignment across feeder patterns in both programs that are available to kids. So if you have this robotics program at the high school level, then there should be a robotics program at the middle school and the elementary level to build through that program across the feeder pattern, that they can work together to provide those opportunities. But I'd also like to see the idea of, we wonder if there's the fact that every time a kid gets to the new level, they open enroll into elementary school. And then, of course, they have to reopen enroll if they want to stay in the feeder pattern to go to middle school. And then they have to reopen enroll if they want to go to high school. Why can't we have them open enroll and be able to stay through the feeder pattern if that's what they want? No windows or proper lighting or ventilation. I would like to see that improved. Improved and extended restroom space for students. And I mean, I was part of this master facilities plan the last time around. And I can remember all the conversations that we had and the plans that were being discussed and some of the closures and some of the kind of merging that they were talking about doing, and practically none of it happened. And so I just want to know, again, we're going to put in the effort to do all this. We'd like to see some actual fruition from it.
Thank you very much for your time in that report. Group 14.
Good evening. So like many others, one of the things that we find very successful were in many of our elementaries, we have very high demand for our programs in our schools. So we have lots and lots of little ones learning, which is wonderful. And we have a strong retention of students, but that then leads to the spacing issues that many folks have been discussing also. Other barriers would be that when the students are matriculating upward, some of our smaller schools are leading to fewer options for coursework and requiring that specialized programming from some of our really young learners before they're ready to specialize means that that they're being sort of tracked into something that maybe if we had larger schools, students could have more options that would allow them to have wider choices. And so that all schools should be offering all of these options for our learners rather than asking them to go to specialized smaller spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Group 15.
We had many of the things that have already been discussed, so I don't want to repeat many of the things that were on our list. But as a first grade teacher in the district, I really, we were talking about what an ideal school would look like and would love large libraries and having a conference room possibly to accommodate for IAT meetings. We also talked about having adequate lighting in an outdoor space and physical space for having a room for a counselor in the peak room and having room for all the specialists to work and the ESL students to work also, because in our school, we have 30 different languages spoken, and our positive aspect of our school is that we are so diverse. So our location is ideal, but I would love to have a wonderful staff lounge that can fit the number of staff that, or even a quarter of the staff that we have in our building. And having a separate cafeteria from a gym, and also having rooms for our music and our instrumental and art specialists would be wonderful. So I am looking at it from the perspective of a teacher. And but we also had all of the other things that other people discussed. So that's Room 15's report.
Thank you. Room 16.
Okay, I will take a stab at this, and team, feel free to jump in here. So the items that are successful from our perspective, the team really liked the project-based flex learning spaces, maker spaces like having 3D printers, sewing machines, hand-on activities have a lot of appeal to many students. And there was also a comment that whenever possible, keeping the library separate as a quiet space is really optimal, so we're not overlapping and making a noisy space when kids are trying to have some quiet time. We also liked flexible learning spaces that don't have traditional desks and chairs. We've heard those comments from a couple of folks, and really allowing the kids to configure some different seating arrangements and having that flexibility does help create a successful environment for many children. Some of the aspects of schools that we felt were barriers, need more ADA accessibility throughout many of the schools. Some of our schools are too full to accept more students. And I think that's, by region, there's probably some difference in capacity. Some limited pre-K. I think another individual on here mentioned some difficulties with accessing pre-K. One comment regarding school buses that I haven't heard so far, but transportation can be a barrier for many children. And if the school buses are running late, then the kids enter school late, and that can produce some anxiety and really make kids uncomfortable coming into class late. It can be sort of disruptive to the classroom and the student. We wanted to reiterate that there does seem to be a lack of space for support or itinerant staff who are coming in to do a special job and maybe moving from school to school. We would kind of mirror that comment about support staff having to find space wherever it's available or in the hallway. So ensuring that there's carved out space for staff moving from school to school is very critical. And likewise, community partners who are coming in to do some type of work or partnership with the school don't always have a designated space, and so they're trying to find something that's available and maybe not appropriate for what they're trying to do. Not every school has an active PTA, and then we would mirror the HVAC and other kinds of space issues that many other folks mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Group 18. Were you? Someone here from group
I
18?
can take 18. We talked about some of the strengths being the staff in our schools, being like very strong staff, but also some of the schools having very strong community. In particular, that was a comment about Indianola, informal K-8, and about some of the schools like Indianola having good facilities. We also, on the other side, talked about some of the facilities not being good, and that windows are basically an issue kind of everywhere. For instance, Centennial doesn't have many windows. Other schools may have windows that don't open. Others have windows that open, but I don't know if it's like the age of the window, the style, you can open the window, but there's no airflow through it into the building. And that might also be, I guess, related to the HVAC. We talked about getting state funds for buildings and what types of windows you're allowed to have. One of the people in our group is an architect and said essentially that if you get state money for funding, the state gets to dictate the types of window coverings you have, and they have to be safe, which we all want, but sometimes they're the kind of window covering that goes between the two panes of glass. And they're hard to open, so teachers leave them closed all the time, and the kids can't see outside. They don't get any natural light. They're also a concern about windows that are open and you can't close the curtains easily. Might be a safety risk because the outside can see what's going on inside and do things that we don't want to have happen with our kids. We talked about types of classes we had as kids that we all thought really gave us a lot of life skills in middle school. And those were basically shop class, which as far as we know, none of the middle schools our kids have gone to have had an opportunity to do that. We talked about wanting more different kinds of spaces for kids to learn. And we also we talked about making schools multi-use buildings so that after school communities, people in the community could come in and use the spaces. Some schools allow that and some schools don't. So that's pretty much everything, I think.
Thank you. Group 19.
Hello, good evening, everybody. In group 19, we had a lot. The good is, the Region 4 is kind of a melting pot of the city. There's lots of cultures, lots of races, lots of backgrounds. Also, there's a lot of generational tradition, a lot of pride. And with that, all that diversity comes lots of other interests. There's a need for a lot of extracurriculars, and not just at the high school level, but also the middle school level and the elementary school level. Some of the things that weren't successful, the Region 4 butts up to some very, very successful school districts. For example, Worthington, Dublin, Hilliard, Upper Arlington. We need to stop using other failing school districts as a model, and we have to compete in our own backyard. Our students go in those other schools, and they see those other facilities, and when they come back to our facilities, that can be very disheartening. I had a student earlier this year. We were at a suburban school district, and they were literally throwing out things that we can't even afford. And the kids see that, and it's very emotional for them. We need to compete in our backyard. Our attitudes towards maintenance as a district as a whole. We need to have a plan for deferred maintenance. Instead of buying new and letting things just go until they die, let's expand the lifespan of things. One of the members in our group, she was part of a study for the student union, and she was saying how the cost of renovating versus rebuilding, you know, depending on how you do your maintenance throughout the building's lifetime, you know, is that going to extend it or make it more cost effective? Also with cost effective, getting out of the practice of low bid. And I know that that's a board issue, but we're not saying go spend on everything, but not doing low bid and then having to pay for it twice with taxpayer money, because taxpayers are paying really high taxes in Clintonville and Northwest, and it's on par with the UA districts. That kind of fed into another thing where we're paying all these taxes. Are we offering the same after-school opportunities that our neighboring districts are? You know, is there a plan to expand the extracurriculars more than what they are now for, you know, the middle schools? ADA compliance, that's a big one. One of the barriers were the actual steps, the buildings themselves. I was bringing up, I'm tired of seeing city organizations working against each other. And, you know, I work for Columbus Parks and Rec, I work for Columbus City Schools. We need to work together. There's an aquatic study being done. One of the top 5 nationwide killers of minorities is drowning. In Columbus City Schools, we only have like 2 swim teams, 3.5. Okay. Other schools around us are offering swim programs, but we don't have, for Columbus City, a pool north of Hudson. And, you know, there's demand there. Are we trying to grow stuff? Everybody, no kid goes to school for math. Not to say that. No, I sorry about that. But they go to school for the extracurriculars, extra things. And the more that we offer for those kids, the more they're going to stay in safer spaces. Does that make sense? I hope.
Yeah.
Anybody from my group? I get it all.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. We like he's a football coach at Whetstone. I teach 3rd grade special ed at Colerain. I think we both kind of agreed that even though we're on different sides of the thing, we both kind of agree we both need the extracurriculars, and we also need to worry about our students with disabilities so they can have access to all the good things at schools too. And my elementary school is in desperate need of an upgrade, as many of the schools in the district are. So it's serving the students as best as we can, no matter what their abilities are or what their interests are. We need to throw a big net out to all of them.
Good. Thank you. Group 20, please.
So to avoid mentioning anything that was already mentioned, in group 20, we spent some time talking about a really big picture idea of, do we work with the buildings we have necessarily, or do we look at where we want to be in, say, 20 years and work backwards to figure out what we need to do to get there? And so in that vein, we thought perhaps there, at the high school level at least, are too many schools. And at some point we might want to have fewer but larger schools. Maybe they're all 1,500 to 2,000 students like the suburbs. And that way the students who go to those schools have access to more of the program, since right now a lot of students have to make hard choices about what programs to get involved in, because maybe depending on where they go to school, they don't have access to it. And if they go to Fort Hayes, they give up something else that was at their traditional school, et cetera. So we felt like that was important to consider. How do we make that equitable? And then tagging on a bit to one of the last comments about the swimming and the possibility of a natatorium or something like that, we wondered about having within the district several, either one or one per region, kind of bigger, nicer athletic facility that would be shared by all of the high schools in that area. So, some other towns have done this. What if there was a big, nice football stadium and several schools could coordinate the use of that, and maybe back at their own building, they just have kind of a practice field. So that was another idea that we threw out, and wondered a little bit about what the district will do with forecasting enrollment patterns and attendance patterns, so that hopefully we don't run into the situation of remodeling a school or building a new school and it's immediately full. So those things were sort of not just specific to our region, I understand, but kind of a
a bigger picture. And then we also had some interest in getting community involvement in school spaces, maybe in the context of libraries, and then the air quality and lighting quality, et cetera. And we also hoped that teachers would be involved in some of the space design, so that we don't run into a situation where some rooms are remodeled, but maybe the layout of it isn't very useful. So that definitely came up as well.
Thank you. And our last group, and then we're going to do a sum up. The last group is 21. Is there anyone from group 21 who would like to speak? We'd like to hear what you had to say. Going once, going twice. Okay, Carissa, Carissa Izzo, our family ambassador. Are there any interesting thoughts you've seen on any of the Google Forms that haven't been shared?
I think the biggest thing, one thing, holistic education, one group brought up. Also full-time nurses, counselors, social workers at all levels. And then the other would be more space that can be used outdoor with the nature. How can we incorporate nature into our schools, and recycling? And then there were some questions about how the FMP committee was selected, budget, and so we should probably address those questions maybe in a fact, and like a we'll get those answers to those questions to everyone, because there were some good questions about what's the process of the FMP, and why are we doing this?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming here and presenting your ideas and thoughts, and all of this information will be incorporated into the conceptual thinking of how this master plan will come together. Comments from tonight, along from the comments from the community discussions from the other 5 planning groups, will be reviewed at a facilities planning committee. This review process will lead to future questions at upcoming surveys. And when they just popped up that screen, my script disappeared. There we go. This review process will lead to future questions at upcoming surveys and the discussion points in future community meetings. Please join us on Wednesday, April 28th at 6 p.m. by tuning in virtually, as this meeting will be live streamed on the district Facebook and YouTube page. Thank you so much for taking the time to share today, and look for a new survey for the Envision phase early May. We will all look forward to our next community discussion later in May, and your input is greatly appreciated, and it will all be read. I promise you that. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all. Have a nice night.